For context, I'm Robert Cain, a self-made man. Built my wealth from the ground up. No family money, no handouts. Just smart investments, brutal hours, and an instinct for spotting opportunities before anyone else. By the time I hit 40, I was worth more than I ever dreamed of. Private jets, a Hamptons vacation home, elite circles, I had it all. Or at least, I thought I did. Enter Diane, my wife of 20 years. She was with me through the grind, or so I believed. We had a solid life together, or at least, I had convinced myself we did. But looking back, I realize now there were cracks forming for years. Diane had a way of making everything seem perfect on the surface. Always put together, always the social butterfly, always charming at dinner parties. But there was something about her, something I ignored. Maybe it was how she always seemed restless. Like the life we built wasn't enough. Like I wasn't enough. Still, I never saw what was coming. The first red flag was subtle, an odd charge on one of our accounts. A transfer I didn't remember approving. It was nothing huge at first, just little things that didn't add up. A few thousand here, a wire there. But when I brought it up casually over dinner one night, she brushed it off so smoothly that I almost believed her. "Oh, Robert, you're always so paranoid. It's just a routine transfer for some home renovations." I let it go. Then came the Hamptons house. One night, I was going through paperwork for tax season when I noticed something strange. The property deed had been changed. Not just refinanced. The ownership had quietly shifted into Diane's name alone. That's when I felt it, that gut instinct that had made me millions in business. Something was very wrong. But here's the kicker. I didn't even have to investigate myself. My son, Jason, beat me to it. Jason is 22, just graduated from MIT. Smart as hell, maybe even smarter than me. He had picked up on something before I did, little inconsistencies, changes in Diane's behavior. He had been watching and hacking. One night, Jason came into my home office, his face grim. "Dad, you need to see this." He handed me his laptop, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Bank statements, transfers, hidden accounts. Diane had been bleeding me dry for months. And that wasn't all. There was another name attached to all these transactions. Michael Thorne, a personal trainer she had insisted on hiring last year. A man I barely gave a second thought to. Turns out, Diane and Michael weren't just working on her fitness goals. They were working on something else entirely. And that was just the beginning. When my son Jason handed me his laptop, I knew deep down that my life was about to change. On the screen, there it was. Hard, undeniable proof. Bank transfers. Property shifts. And Michael Thorne's name, over and over again. The Michael I had barely noticed, just a face in the background of our lives. The personal trainer Diane had hired under the guise of self-care. The charming, fit, all-smiles gym rat I had once shaken hands with, never realizing he was smiling like a wolf in my own home. Jason had been watching. "Dad, I wasn't sure at first," he said, voice tight. "But Mom's been—" He hesitated, as if saying it out loud would make it worse. "She's been moving money, hiding things. I traced it all. She's not just stealing from you. She's getting ready to leave." Leave. The word sat like a dead weight in my gut. I scrolled through the screen, my mind racing. Over $800,000 in slow, careful withdrawals over the past year. 2 separate offshore accounts. The Hamptons house fully in her name, thanks to a power of attorney document I had apparently signed. No doubt slipped into one of the stacks of papers she had me go through absent-mindedly while running my company. And then the kicker. A single email, buried in one of her accounts, from Michael to Diane. We're almost there, baby. Just a little longer. I love you. I sat there, stunned. I had faced cutthroat business rivals. I had survived economic crashes and outplayed billionaires. But this was personal. And it wasn't just some fling. No, this was a plan. Diane wasn't just cheating. She was robbing me, setting herself up for a clean getaway while I sat clueless, thinking I had a loyal wife. And that's when the switch flipped. I took a slow breath. Jason was watching me, waiting for some kind of explosion, but I wasn't about to give Diane or Michael that satisfaction. No, if Diane wanted to play this game, she had no idea who she was up against. I closed the laptop, my voice calm. Good work, son. Jason blinked. That's it? You're not. Oh, I'm going to handle this, I said, standing up. But not yet. We're going to do this right. See, Diane thought she was playing chess. She thought she was outmaneuvering me, moving her pieces carefully. What she didn't know, I was about to flip the entire board. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was emotional, not because I was heartbroken. No, those feelings had burned away, leaving something colder, sharper. I sat in my office, staring at the flickering city lights outside my window, thinking about all the ways Diane had played me. 20 years. 20 years of marriage, of trust, of building an empire together, only to find out that she was siphoning money behind my back, transferring property, and planning a quiet escape with some low-rent scam artist in gym shorts. Jason was watching me carefully from the doorway. He had always been observant, calculating. He didn't just inherit my intelligence, he inherited my ruthlessness. What's the plan? He asked. I glanced at him, then back at the laptop screen where Michael Thorne's smug emails stared back at me. The plan, I said, my voice steady, is to take back everything she tried to steal, and then make sure she and Michael never recover from this. Jason nodded. I'm in. Step 1. Cut off the escape route. Diane thought she was being clever by shifting assets into her name, but she wasn't as clever as she thought. I had built my fortune from the ground up. I knew every financial loophole, every backdoor move. Within 24 hours, I had my team of forensic accountants and lawyers on the case. By the time Diane woke up, every single one of her secret accounts was frozen. Her emergency funds? Gone. The offshore accounts? Locked. Her personal savings? Overdrawn. The best part? I did it quietly. She wouldn't even notice until she tried to use her credit card. Jason and I sat back and waited for the chaos to begin. It started small, an annoyed sigh when she tried to place an online order and her card was declined. Then a frown when her bank app refused to load. Then, by midday, full-blown panic when she got on the phone with customer service. What do you mean my accounts are locked? She snapped, pacing the living room. There has to be some mistake. My husband and I. She stopped mid-sentence. Because deep down, she knew. I walked past her, sipping my coffee like nothing was wrong. Everything okay? She froze, her face carefully neutral. Yeah, just some bank issues. I smiled. Huh? Weird. And kept walking. Step 2. Take back what's mine. Diane had been dumb enough to think I wouldn't notice the Hamptons house transfer. What she didn't know was that the lawyer who had signed off on the paperwork. My lawyer. It took one phone call to have that little scheme unraveled. Within hours, the property was legally mine again. She was too busy dealing with her bank issues to notice the email hitting her inbox. The subject line read, urgent, fraudulent property transfer reversed. By the time she opened it, I was already steps ahead. Step 3. Make Michael Thorne's life a living hell. Diane had picked the wrong man to cheat with. Michael wasn't just some fling, he was a con artist. He had a history of seducing wealthy women, draining their bank accounts, and then vanishing. Too bad for him. He messed with the wrong family. Jason had already dug up everything we needed on him: his past scams, his debts, his enemies. We sent anonymous tips to his previous victims, women who had been scammed. Some of them had powerful husbands who didn't take kindly to being played. It didn't take long before Michael started sweating. Suddenly, his phone number was leaked to the wrong people. Debt collectors started calling. His gym mysteriously lost its biggest investors. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, a very angry loan shark showed up at his door. The walls were closing in. And Diane? She still had no idea. But that was about to change. Diane was having the worst day of her life. She just didn't know it yet. By mid-afternoon, I could see the cracks forming. She had spent the entire morning on the phone, first with the bank, then with her lawyer, then back to the bank. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I knew her well enough to hear the panic underneath. Jason sat across from me in the study, watching her through the security cameras. We had the entire house covered, just another precaution I had put in place over the years. "Think she's figured it out yet?" Jason asked, smirking. I sipped my coffee. "Not even close." Diane was scrambling, trying to make sense of the financial chaos that had just wrecked her life. She thought she was in control, that she had played the perfect game. But the truth? She was already checkmated. Step 4. Burn her social life to the ground. Diane prided herself on her image. She had spent years crafting the perfect persona: charming, influential, untouchable. The kind of woman who walked into a high-end boutique and had people rushing to serve her. That was about to change. Jason had been busy that morning. With just a few clicks, he sent anonymous emails to all the right people: her charity boards, her high society friends, her favorite country club. Attached? Screenshots of her texts with Michael. The ones where she laughed about how easy it was to transfer the Hamptons house into her name. The ones where she called her friends pathetic old hags behind their backs. The ones where she mocked them for donating to charities, while she was secretly siphoning money into offshore accounts. By lunchtime, her phone was blowing up with messages. "Linda, you lying asterisk asterisk asterisk. Lose my number. Asterisk Victoria, don't ever show your face at the club again. Martha, you're a fraud and everyone knows it." And then the final dagger from the Hampton Social Committee: due to recent revelations, your membership is under review. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all events. Diane froze when she read that one. I watched from the kitchen as she clutched her phone, her face drained of color. She tried to call someone, maybe one of her friends, to salvage the situation, but no one answered. The Queen of the Hamptons had just become a pariah. Jason grinned. "Damn, that was fast." I nodded. "Rich people turn on each other quicker than wolves when there's blood in the water." Diane slammed her phone onto the counter, her breath coming fast. That's when she turned and saw me watching her. She forced a tight smile. "Robert, something weird is going on with our accounts." "Oh." I took a sip of coffee. "That's strange." She studied me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You wouldn't know anything about it, would you?" I smiled. "Diane," I said, my voice perfectly calm, "why don't you tell me what you've been up to?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, hesitated, then answered. "Michael?" I watched her, watched as her expression collapsed. Because Michael wasn't calling to comfort her. He was calling because his life was falling apart too. Step 5. Make Michael Thorne disappear. Michael thought he was slick. He had done this before: seduced rich, bored housewives, drained their money, and skipped town before things got messy. But this time, he picked the wrong mark. First, his gym mysteriously lost funding. Then, his car was repossessed. Then, his landlord evicted him for unpaid rent. Jason had made sure of that with a little creative hacking. But the final nail in the coffin? Michael had debts. Bad ones. Jason and I had done some digging, and it turned out Michael had borrowed money from some very dangerous people. People who didn't take kindly to being conned. Jason made one anonymous tip to the right guy, and suddenly Michael was in serious trouble. Which is why, at that exact moment, Diane was gripping her phone, whispering into the receiver like her life depended on it. "Michael, what are you talking about? What do you mean your accounts are gone?" She paused, listening. Then, "You're leaving? No, you can't just, Michael! Michael!" Click. She stared at the phone, shaking. Michael had vanished. She was alone. Her money? Gone. Her lover? Gone. Her friends? Gone. And then she turned back to me, finally realizing the truth. I leaned against the counter, watching her with a slow smile. "Something wrong, sweetheart?" She took a shaky breath. "Robert, I can explain." I chuckled. "Oh, Diane, I know you can." I set the divorce papers on the table, and that's when she finally broke. Diane's hands trembled as she stared at the divorce papers. She wasn't crying. Not yet. But I could see the panic setting in, the slow, suffocating realization that everything she had counted on was slipping through her fingers. Her accounts? Frozen. Her lover? Gone. Her reputation? Shattered. And now, her marriage, the golden cage she had taken for granted, was about to be dismantled, brick by brick. She swallowed hard, trying to regain composure. "Robert, let's not be hasty." I almost laughed. Hasty? She had been planning this for over a year. I leaned back against the counter, watching her like a predator sizing up its prey. "Hasty?" I echoed. "You stole from me. You lied to me. You were ready to leave me for some third-rate con artist." She opened her mouth, but I wasn't finished. "You thought you were being clever, Diane. That you could siphon my money, shift property into your name, and just waltz off into the sunset with Michael." I tilted my head. "How's that working out for you?" She flinched. I knew her well enough to see what she was thinking. Damage control. Diane had always been good at spinning situations, at charming her way out of trouble. But this? There was no spinning this. Still she tried. "Robert," she said, her voice soft now, almost pleading. "We've been together for 20 years. We built this life together. I just—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I just felt lost." I raised an eyebrow. "Lost? So your solution was to steal from me and sleep with another man?" She winced. "It wasn't like that." I smirked. "Oh, no. Tell me, Diane. What was it like?" Silence. I let it hang between us, let her feel the weight of it. Then I picked up the divorce papers and flipped to the last page, tapping the signature line. "Sign it." She stared at the document like it was a death sentence. "Robert, we don't have to do this. We can sign it." My voice was sharper now. Her eyes darted to the papers, then back to me. She wasn't ready. She had spent all this time preparing to leave me, but she had never considered what would happen if I left her first. She licked her lips, desperate now. "Can't we just talk?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Diane, I already let you talk. For 20 years. And now, I'm done listening." She opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, the doorbell rang. She jolted. I glanced at Jason, who smirked. Perfect timing. Diane frowned, confused. Who is that? I folded my arms. Why don't you answer it? She hesitated before slowly moving to the door. When she opened it, I saw her body stiffen. Standing outside was a man in a dark suit, an SEC investigator. Behind him, a uniformed police officer. Diane's breath hitched. What is this? The investigator gave her a tight-lipped smile. Mrs. Cain, we need to have a conversation about some financial irregularities. She turned to me, eyes wide. Robert, I shrugged. Oh, didn't I mention? You triggered a federal investigation when you tried to transfer that house fraudulently. Turns out, the government doesn't take kindly to financial fraud. Diane's face drained of color. The officer stepped forward. Mrs. Cain, we have some questions for you. If you could come with us, wait, she stammered. No, this is a mistake. She turned to me again, her voice frantic now. Robert, please. I just smiled. Goodbye, Diane. And with that, the woman who had once held everything, money, power, luxury, and a husband who would have done anything for her, was escorted out of my house like a common criminal. Jason and I watched as she disappeared down the driveway. She's done, Jason murmured. I nodded. And we're just getting started. Because while Diane was going down, Michael Thorne still had one final lesson to learn. No one crosses the Cain family and walks away unscathed. Diane was gone, hauled away like the white-collar fraud she was. But I wasn't done. There was still one loose end. Michael Thorne, the smug, muscle-bound con artist who thought he could steal from me, screw my wife, and walk away unscathed. He had vanished after our little financial chokehold took effect. His gym was bankrupt. His landlord had evicted him. His car? Repossessed. The man was officially broke. But Jason and I knew exactly where he'd go. Because men like Michael always run to the same place, their last safety net, his ex-wife. Jason had been tracking his movements, and sure enough, Michael had crawled back to a woman named Vanessa. She lived in a cheap condo on the outskirts of Atlantic City. Michael had no other options. His offshore accounts were wiped, his sugar mama was under federal investigation, and his debts? Well, they had caught up to him. And that's where the fun began. Step 1. Burn his last bridge. Jason and I paid Vanessa a little visit. She answered the door in an oversized sweatshirt, dark circles under her eyes. Who the hell are you? I smiled politely. Robert Cain. This is my son, Jason. Her eyes narrowed. Cain? She processed it for a second, then her entire face changed. You're the guy Michael's been talking about. Is that so? I said, amused. And what's he been saying? She crossed her arms. That you're some rich bastard who ruined his life. Jason snorted. Sounds about right. I took a step closer. Tell me, Vanessa, do you have any money left? She flinched. What? I sighed. Let me guess. Michael came crawling back, told you some sob story, and now he's living off whatever savings you had left? Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I leaned in slightly. Let me give you a little history lesson. Your ex-husband is a con artist. He's spent years seducing rich women, draining their accounts, and disappearing. Diane wasn't his first, and I can promise you she won't be his last. Vanessa's face darkened. That son of a b**********. Jason handed her a folder. Inside were copies of Michael's past scams, photos, text messages, financial transactions. Everything. She flipped through it, her expression going from anger to pure rage. I gave her a small smile. Now, I don't care what you do with this information. But if I were you, I'd make sure he never scams another woman again. She looked up at me. You don't have to worry about that. She turned on her heel and slammed the door shut, disappearing inside. Jason smirked. Think she'll kick him out? I chuckled. Oh, she'll do more than that. And she did. By the next morning, Michael's last place to hide was gone. Vanessa had thrown his pathetic, unemployed ass out onto the street. Step 2. Make sure he's never a threat again. Michael was desperate now. He tried to run, but Jason and I had made sure he had nowhere to go. And then came the final nail in the coffin. See, Michael had made a lot of enemies over the years. He owed money to some very dangerous people. People who don't file lawsuits. People who don't send letters. People who collect their debts in blood. Jason had made one anonymous tip to the right guy. And just like that, Michael Thorne became a wanted man. By the time we checked the news, the story was everywhere. Men found dead in Atlantic City Hotel. Possible mob retaliation. Michael Thorne had been found face down in a cheap hotel room, an empty bottle of whiskey on the nightstand. The police were treating it as a mob hit, but no one really cared enough to investigate. Jason looked at me, his expression unreadable. That was fast. I sipped my coffee. Men like him don't last long once they're exposed. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel regret. Michael had built his entire life on using people, ruining them, discarding them. And now, he had been discarded too. Step 3. The final blow to Diane. With Michael gone and Diane's life in ruins, there was only one thing left to do: ensure she never recovered. Jason had made sure that every legal avenue was taken. Diane's assets? Seized. Her social status? Destroyed. But the final humiliation? A divorce settlement that left her with nothing. She begged for a better deal. Pleaded with my lawyers. Tried to guilt Jason. It didn't work. When it was all over, she was forced to take a low-level receptionist job in New Jersey, barely making enough to cover monthly restitution payments to me and Jason. A far cry from the Queen of the Hamptons she once was. One night, I got a text from Jason. Jason, Diane just posted on Facebook. She's working in some office, complaining about toxic men. I chuckled. How the mighty had fallen. But just to make sure she never forgot, I sent her one last message. Me, you did this to yourself. She saw it. Read it. Didn't reply. Because she knew. She knew that betraying the Cain family was the worst mistake of her life. And that she would be paying for it forever. Final step. The future 10 years later, Jason is running Phoenix Securities, taking our empire into the digital age. I've taken a step back, enjoying the peace I built for myself. Diane? She's still stuck in New Jersey, barely scraping by. Watched. Always. Just in case she ever forgets the price of betrayal. The Cain family remains an unstoppable force. Our enemies are destroyed. Our power? Unchallenged. And the lesson is clear: betray the Cain family, and you pay forever.